Americans are afraid of their government, and for good reason. Government agencies have taken extraordinary control of our land, food, home, and our money. What is even more frightening is the coercive control the government is taking over our children, the most precious relationship we have on this planet. Education, medical care, and even possession of your child is under the close scrutiny of agencies that monetize our children. Connie Reguli and Cynthia Becker are bringing you real-life stories of the trauma and destruction of an agency meant to protect children from harm, CPS. Child Protective Services operates in every state and has the power to take your children on anonymous allegations even without investigating and without giving you a day in court. Let's get started.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Cynthia, and I'm one of the hosts of Exposing CPS, Families Tell All. Today we have an amazing guest, Audrey Lesner. She has a horrific CPS horror story dealing with Child Protective Services and her children and her husband. And then Connie Reguli, would you like to start with you?
So hello to everybody from Tennessee. Here I am. If you have followed me at all on social media, you know that I have represented and tried to help families for 3 decades. And finally went to social media and started exposing what was going on, really because I wanted to find out if the things that I saw in my day-to-day work with cases was really going on a much broader scale. Because sometimes I would try to make changes, or I talk to people who were in legislation, and they would think, they really thought that I was an anomaly, that only these things happen to me or only my clients. And I'm like, no, they don't. So I am so happy to join up with Cynthia. I know she's done several podcasts with families, and for us to be able to have kind of a more of an exchange and a dialogue, also being able to include from my perspective. So, and I always encourage families to tell their stories. I know a lot of people are afraid to, a lot of people are embarrassed about it, especially if they're in the middle of it, they don't know how to handle it. But you know what? It's your story. And it is your story to tell. It is your story to heal from. We're here as support. We're not here to try to make anybody look bad or feel bad. We know how complex this situation is. We want better parents, and we want parents who help children make it to adulthood so we can have a better society here in America, because honestly, it's kind of a mess. So I am so happy. I do not know Audrey. I know Audrey and Cynthia have had some conversation in shows before. So I'm going to kind of let them start into it and kind of lead the way. And I'm sure I'll be butting in, either just talking or raising my hand or something. So I look forward to hearing what Audrey has to share with us.
Yeah, so Audrey's story starts in 2017, like mine did. And she came on as a guest on my other show, the reality series, CPS The Horror Stories. And beyond her sharing her story, we actually grew a really good friendship. And so we've remained in contact all these years, and I've just been there for each other, whether it was to pray, to go over our current situation, just to share with each other. Because what people don't realize is when you step into the CPS light, you literally feel like you're walking in there alone. You don't feel like anybody's in your court fighting with you, for you. You just feel alone. So that's one thing I have vowed, is to not let anybody else feel alone. And that's why I host the other show. So, hi, friend.
Hi. One thing I wanted to touch on is you are absolutely correct, Reguli. I hope I said that correctly.
Nope, it's regularly.
Regularly, I apologize.
It's okay.
There are so many situations that families are put in a crisis situation and nobody knows about it because nobody talks about it. And you're also correct, Cynthia. There are so many cases, including my own, where you go into a courtroom and you say, okay, I've got this prosecution team against me, but I have my defending attorney. And then they find out during the hearings and the trials that not even their defense attorney is on their side. They're there to make the big bucks. They're there to sell you out and tell you to take a plea bargain, take this, take that, do all of this. And what the people don't realize is when they go up against an entire court system, they are already decided on what they are supposed to do to cooperate with CPS and the courts, or they lose all.
Yeah. So, Audrey, I'm just going to jump in right here because, often when I give talks about working in the system and attorneys, because people are like, my attorney won't fight for me, attorney won't fight for me. And I say, look, y'all, let me give you a reality lesson here. If you were a judge, would you rather have some attorney walk into the courtroom and say, you know what, judge, we've got an agreement. We just have to work out a couple details. We're going to sign off on it. We'll be done here in just a couple minutes. Or would you rather have Connie regularly walk into the courtroom who says, Judge, I think it's going to be a 6-day trial, right? So who do you think that judge would rather see? I mean,
It depends on the judge.
no,
If the judge is
never want to
righteous,
see me. They never want to see me. Trust me.
I've never heard any story where the judge is wanting to hear a fair trial. It is always again.
surprisingly, ladies, I have had one judge tell the social workers here in Wyoming, this is not a parental rights termination, and I don't want to hear anything about parental rights termination. We're here to settle this matter and get Audrey Lesnar back with her son, Anthony Lesnar Jr.
Wow.
I was floored.
And just as a preface, that was not her first case. So she has experience with the negative. So let's jump into it, Audrey.
Yes.
Take us back. Remember, we only have, 50 minutes.
Okay.
I know your story can go on for days. So let's do a quick intro in a nutshell so we can catch Connie up on what's happened.
Absolutely. In April of 2017, my husband and I were attacked by the state of Texas. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail of what happened, but I can tell you there was no court order. There was no warrant. There was no warning. And so when, excuse me just a second. When my husband and I were first approached by these Randall County Sheriff's Department deputies, we thought, hey, we can cite our constitutional rights and they have to go get a warrant. They have to go get a court order. Didn't happen. We actually had these officers and these 2 social workers threatening us with guns. They threatened to shoot us if we did not surrender our daughters to them at 0200 hours on the 19th of April.
And I'm sorry, was that in Texas or in Wyoming?
Yes, that was in Texas.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
And really fast, Audrey, can you state your husband's position at that time?
My husband is a 10-year veteran of the United States Navy. He has served 2 tours in the Middle East and was an MA, which is a police officer in the Navy. I too am a veteran of the United States Navy. I only spent 2 years, and I am disabled as my husband is as well. And that was one of their biggest attacks is you're disabled veterans, therefore you're unfit parents. Yes, ma'am.
What?
Yes, ma'am. Anyway, so that night, I told the officers to leave our home. They had no court order, they had no warrant, they had no business being there to take our daughters. And they told us we don't have to have a court order or warrant. We have our cuffs. And if you continue to defy us, we're going to shoot you. So we were forced to surrender our daughters at 0200 hours. The youngest was 18 months, still nursing.
It's all right.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I know.
Forgive me.
It's okay. Just going back to that place. And, I tell parents, even when you just try to articulate that part of it, I mean, people, I do that when I talk about them trying to, shenanigan my daughter, when she was a teenager, and that's 10 years ago. So, when we tell these stories and we go back to those places, and it's important for people who watch this to know that trauma, because when I talk about children being removed from parents, and I don't know if you ever saw the one where I went out and live streamed them
Yes, I
remove
did.
baby
I did
Lucy
see that
from
one.
her mother. And, I got a lot of grief about it, but it's like, I want you to see what
Right.
happens when they rip a baby out of their mother's arms, and she was 4 weeks old, and
Yep.
how, this mother basically fell to the pavement. So,
I know exactly how she felt. I
yes,
was laying on that bed trying to console my daughter as best I could, and she was shaking. She was trying to nurse, but she knew they were going to take her, and she was shaking. And the person that took her from my breast was, in fact, the kidnapper wife.
Mm.
I don't know the entire plan of action, but I do know that my daughter, my youngest daughter, was targeted to be adopted from birth.
What?
My brother, if I want to call him that, and his wife only had one son. They could not have any more children. And so they were looking at adopting and were told they didn't make enough money. Then the social worker told them about how if they do a closed family event, they didn't have to pay for the adoption process and all of that. I just give them my baby and sign off on relinquishing parental rights, and they take over from there.
And just, sorry, Audrey, I'm going to be jumping in
No,
because
you're fine. You're fine.
I
Go
know
ahead.
you shared it, so that way, in case something's, missed, but this, coercion of trying to take her baby happened in the beginning. Hey,
6 months.
can we have your child?
And I
Can
said
we,
no. My husband said no.
they didn't like that. And so the allegation originally started with her nephew, the little boy, taking, and
10-year-old
saying,
nephew
yep,
said that my 9-year-old daughter outcried about her daddy sexually abusing her.
Oh.
10 years old. Number one, he's a pathological liar. Number two, what the hell were they thinking on taking a 10-year-old's word without investigating first? And three, at the time, my daughter was denying. She was saying he was lying. They had gotten into a fight, and he threatened her daddy.
and Audrey, really fast, do you want to tell us where your husband has been and currently is?
After fighting the state of Texas for 2 years in 2019, my husband was sentenced to prison for 110 years. And he currently is still there, but we're working on that. We have found a phenomenal organization agency to help us, and Wes is just phenomenal.
So, what was their evidence?
They had no physical evidence. All they have is hearsay.
But did your daughter testify against him?
At the end, yes, but you guys have to understand the elements of coercion that they used on my eldest daughter to get her to testify against her dad. I mean, their last and final attempt worked. They threw my eldest daughter in jail. And they kept her there for what I understand was 2 weeks to a month. I can't get the truth out of the person that told me that, or I can't get the paperwork.
Where is she? Where is your daughter now?
To be perfectly honest, I don't know.
Oh my God.
And there's 3, correct?
4.
4 daughters, sorry,
And
that
you
are
don't-
gone. But she is a good enough parent to be the mom of her son, but not any of her daughters. Just by the
I
way.
raised that argument in 2020 in the courts with a senior judge who agreed with me that the department can't just pick and choose if I'm a fit parent for one child and not another. I'm either a fit parent or I'm not. But he refused to reverse the decision of the jury. He tucked his tail.
Now you had a jury trial on what? Your TPR?
Yes.
Terminate. Oh, so you had a jury trial on a termination of parental rights in
Yes.
Texas?
Yes.
Oh, because you don't get a jury trial here in Tennessee.
Well, by constitutional right, you are supposed to be able to have a jury trial in any state.
Yeah.
I will say that. But getting back to that night, my 4 daughters were taken. And I'm not going to go into detail about what happened because that will get me crying again.
Okay, so hold on. And the youngest was 18 months old?
And she
And
was
the-
still nursing.
And then the oldest was how old at that time?
9.
And now are all of the girls your husband's daughters? Okay. And then you have another child since then again.
My son.
And how long have you and your husband been together?
13 years. We've actually known each other for 17. We had Katie out of wedlock 16 years ago, and we were off and on, but he was still in the Navy, so it was just kind of a touch and go kind of thing. Well, then when he got out, we got married when Katie was 3. So we've been married for 13 years. We've been together for 17.
Wow. And so when they took the children, where did they go? Did they go in foster care, or did they go with your brother?
They did go into foster care, but they went into relative kinship.
Right.
And I objected to that after I found out who the accusers were. And I had a IPCP, I believe, ICPC, that's what it's called, done so that my daughters could be sent to Indiana to get them out of the catastrophe. And the state of Texas stopped it.
And who were you going to send them to in Indiana?
Their grandparents on my husband's side. They were not involved in any way, shape, or form on either side. So they were perfect candidates for not having anything to know about the case. So they couldn't discuss it with my daughters, for not having any involvement on either side.
Okay, so hang on. So the girls are removed and they're put with your brother.
Yes.
Is that right? And this is the same brother who said they wanted your daughter, your baby. And they had one child who was about the age of your oldest daughter, close to the age of...
No. Their son is the same age as my 3rd daughter, and she was 3.
Okay. But you said a
10-year-old.
10-year-old child.
The nephew of the sister that accused my husband of sexually abusing my daughter is the same age as my eldest daughter.
Okay,
Well,
wait a minute.
almost.
Hold on. Nephew. So your sister's nephew.
I have 7 sisters.
Okay, and then you said something. You started to say something earlier about the woman who actually physically removed your baby from your side, and you said, and who is that person?
My
You,
brother's wife, the one that wanted my baby.
you're, and how? Why was she there? Was she a police officer?
No,
It was a setup.
we were set up.
Oh my gosh! Do
You
you
These
want
think?
to?
officers showed up at 23:20 hours. Like I said, no court order, no warrant, and demanded our daughters practically at gunpoint.
And
Wow.
her brother and sister-in-law just happened to be there
Yep. We were
so
moving
that
in
they
with
could take
ours.
the kids.
It was planned. It was all completely concocted.
So do you think they split the girls up?
I cannot speculate what happened. All I know is what I was told through paperwork, what I have reviewed in the case. That night, my eldest daughter was taken to a sane nurse in an emergency room where she was, go now, where she was sexually assaulted by a sane nurse with a medical tool.
Hmm.
And conveniently, they didn't videotape the interview, the exam, none of it, because they knew they had crossed the line. And when I asked the same nurse, why didn't she record all of that interview and the examination, she said the camera was conveniently broken. Then they changed it and said, oh no, the camera wasn't broken, it was in for repairs.
Wow. So they did an interview of her that night,
Yes,
but they didn't preserve it.
correct. That has been one of my biggest issues.
Yeah, I would say
Because
so.
when I
I would
saw
say
my
so.
eldest daughter 3 days later, she was crying on me and saying, Mommy, they hurt me and made me bleed. And they're telling me to say things about daddy that aren't true. And I'm so scared, Mommy. So I pulled out my cell phone and took a recording of my daughter crying out for her daddy to save her.
And you still have that?
I do.
Were you were not able to use that in the criminal case?
Conveniently, the judge told me it had to be played by my cell phone, which was in the custody of the Department of Sheriff. They criminally trespassed me, so I couldn't get to their office and grab all of my discovery. I have a 10-page affidavit that I wrote at the sheriff's department, and when I asked them for a copy of that affidavit, they told me their printer was broken. And to come back the next day, and I would be able to get that a copy of my affidavit.
Oh my gosh. Did you go back the next day?
I did.
And did you get it?
I was criminally trespassed.
They charged you?
Nope. They never charged me with anything. They just called me a criminal, and all of their speculations of me being a threat.
So they kicked you out?
Yes.
Did
kicked
they
me out of
arrest
the
you?
office. No. They just handed me a warning for trespassing, and I still have that warning.
So have you ever gotten a copy of that affidavit?
Nope. No, ma'am.
And it wasn't provided to your husband in his criminal discovery?
I told his defense attorney about it, and he never made an effort to get that discovery.
Wow. And so where is your video of your daughter now?
In the cell phone and on my computer. My husband is very brilliant, and he was able to transfer the video from my cell phone to the computer before the sheriff's department followed us from CPS office over to our house, which was roughly about 40 minutes away. and confiscate my phone without a court order or a warrant. They ripped the cell phone out of my hands, and I told them I need that, and they were like, "Nope, it's in our custody now."
And
Thanks for handing it over.
did you ever get it back?
Nope. No, ma'am.
See, they did that to Wendy too. In Wendy's case, they took her son's cell phone. This is a little bit of diversion, but you know, it's the same kind of thing. So her whole case was because her son was basically dealing drugs in the driveway, and she told him to stop, and he told her she was going to jail, and then he makes a CPS complaint on her, and you know that the police department took his phone, which was which she was paying for, of course, was hers, and then would never give it back. 10 months later, gave it back. Then it was wiped
No,
clean.
I've never gotten my cell phone back.
Well, they wiped it clean before they gave it back to her, which had all the evidence of the drug dealing he was doing, which she was unable to present to the court when she was trying to get her kids back. Oh,
They're
my
trying to
gosh.
protect officers, I bet.
Well, they're trying to conceal evidence. I'm going to tell you, Cynthia and I have done another interview with a woman in Tennessee, and we talked about evidence that she received from her kids, and she was court ordered to destroy it, and it's evidence. I'm like, what the heck?
If the system believes that it incriminates them, they will do everything they can to eliminate that element of proof.
Well, yeah.
So,
I mean,
the stuff that I have right now could send the sheriff to prison. But I have to.
Well, and I'll tell you, I mean, I had a case that involved a young man who was in a juvenile detention center and was sexually assaulted, and they destroyed the video evidence from that right in the public facility. I mean, it's like, I couldn't believe it, and they lied about it. And
yes,
so yeah, and then I've got another case in Tennessee where, they came in and basically did a SWAT takedown on this home so that they could take a kid, but they also took a bunch of weapons and jewelry and money. And then
it's inevitable that they're doing all of this. We know what they're doing. The question is, how do we stop it?
Well, that's absolutely, yeah. I mean,
so
that's
anyway,
true.
I wrote that 10-page affidavit. Never got a copy of it. They thought they had eliminated the only copy of my daughter's outcrying for help. Problem is, my Bluetooth was recording the vocal part of it, so the video is almost impossible to hear. And but they said that she was crying to me, that her daddy hurt her and everything. I was like, nope, try again. So they've tried to silence me because I'm the one who did that recording. I know exactly what she said on that cell phone. So anyway, I have that criminal trespass on me, so I couldn't gather all of my discovery to present to the jury in the trial. Then, when I tried to get that stuff, conveniently, the sheriff of Randall County now, who is Forbes, refuses to return my calls. When my daughters were taken, my eldest was taken to the hospital and tortured. My 5-year-old was then taken with my eldest the next day before the judge signed off on these searches. So these were done illegally. They took my daughters to what they call the bridge, and they did interviews on both of them. For some reason, I've been able to get a hold of my eldest daughter's interview, but my second daughter's interview was never released. Then I found out because my daughter, her interview incriminated CPS. So we have yet to pull that interview. But I do know that my second brilliant daughter called him stupid and said her daddy never hurt her.
Wow. So do you have, so I'm a little confused. The oldest daughter's interview, you do have it, you don't have it? Did they
I do
use it?
have, I have the bridge interview, not the SANE exam.
Right.
They claimed that the SANE exam was never recorded. But let's think about this. It's done in a hospital. It's to my understanding there are cameras in those hospitals.
Hmm.
Just saying.
Yeah. Well, some of those, especially in a big facility like that, don't always pick up all the audio, but just it's disturbing that they would do. I mean, I am, and I know some of these forensic ones who are doing physical examinations and they do ask the children questions, they are not recording those. Now,
Yes.
the forensic interviews they do, which is you can, are ultimately disclosed, but the ones that they here, it's called Our Kids, and Our Kids is a clinic that does the medical examination, but then they always actually ask the children questions and they just make notes on it. They don't record it.
They're
So
supposed to record it by
I
law.
know. I know.
Federal
Yeah,
law
and
constitutes. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I have a question for one or both of you. Is it allowed or legal to do any sort of interview or investigation like the forensic interview without another party being present?
That is a trick question, actually. They're supposed to have a witness in interviews, but they don't always have a person available.
So
Yes.
what if they're touching a child for an interview, such, the forensic interview,
Mhm.
because there are people that don't know what a SANE nurse is. I believe it's sexual assault nurse
Nurse examiner.
examination. Okay. And so I can't imagine being a child under, even an adult. I had to go through one of these as an adult. I was 18. Well, I was 18
You're
and
an adult.
yeah, and I still wanted somebody in there with me because that was going to be my, you know, first time being touched in a, there,
Yes.
and I did not want to be alone with that person because what if they were touching me inappropriately and doing things that, unnecessary things or whatever. I can't imagine how a 10-year-old or 5-year-old would feel going through this without somebody there to also make sure that it's being conducted properly.
One thing I do want to make very clear to the parents watching this, it is illegal for an examination to be held without a court order, without a warrant, or without a parent's permission. The three exceptions to this rule is a MD, a psychologist, or a dentist. Those are the only three professionals who can do an examination without a court order.
So I'll make a couple comments here. First, as far as a person present for an interview, there's a couple different things to talk about here. One of them is interviewing period, for CPS to interview period, whether they go to school or the home, whatever.
Right.
So in Tennessee, I had a good state rep that was in office probably 6 or 7 years ago now, but she tried to get a bill passed that said that if CPS went to the school to interview a child, that they needed to either have an independent person present or they needed to record it. And CPS came in and lobbied against it. And here was their excuse. They said, well, if we first talk to a child and they don't disclose anything, but then we talk to them later and they do disclose something, we would have to turn over that first interview as well. I mean, that was their excuse. So, and then as far as the forensic interviews for sexual abuse, that's another interesting question because all of the time they do the forensic interview with just one other person in the room with the child. So, I've struggled with that. I am one who really believes children should be protected from sexual abuse, but I also know very clearly how there can be basically manipulations, and children
Mhm.
can be led to say things. I mean, I've watched dozens of these interviews after the fact, right? Because I've been involved in so many cases, and I've seen, for instance, on a case where I truly thought the child maybe had had some sexual contact with a parent, and the mother nobody was listening to her. And I watched the interview, and in that particular interview, they said something to the child of the nature about, they're asking about touches. And then they ask about a touch in, the private area or whatever. And the child's like, yeah. And then the interviewer, the very next question was, so do you like pizza? And I was like, that was weird. Like the child was just
They're
starting to,
teetering the child away from
yeah,
the
they were like
situation.
actually, obviously
It's a
minimizing it.
psychological mindset turn.
Well,
And I
they
can
they were minimizing the fact that the child had made a statement, and then
Mhm.
they were not exploring it or even allowing
No,
the child to explore it more.
no,
They were obviously distracting the child from the disclosure. But then
that
I've
is
also
true.
see it the other way around. I've seen it where, they had a very young child. I had a case with a very young child one time who I did not believe had been abused. But when they had her in this interview, she was so getting about 10 minutes into the interview, because she was like 4. She was so distracted. She wanted out of there so bad that then she was willing to almost say anything, right, for the interview to be over. And
Mhm.
so she just acknowledged some. It's not that she really disclosed anything, but she would just, yeah, just hoping that the interview would be concluded.
Right.
So we don't have, unfortunately, a lot of really good experts who can break apart these forensic interviews and say, is this good, is it bad, were they distracting, was there other influences, whatever. And so it's always taken at face value, and it's really up to the jury. I mean, I've been on the other side where a child was disclosed and somebody went and told the jury, and they went away for 100 years. And and it was just at face value. I mean, the jury took at face value what the child had disclosed in the forensic interview. Now they had an opportunity to cross-examine the child, and they did a little bit, but they still, just took it. Now, and I'll also tell you, there's a family in a little bit older children. There's a family I've talked to in Pennsylvania where dad has been accused of sexual abuse, and he's in a he's in a very bad position and situation. So, when it's when it's wrong, it's so wrong. When the prosecution is so wrong, and but you now sharing with me the fact that there are other things that mitigate this
Mhm.
disclosure that should have all been laid out there for the jury. It's very challenging. Have you seen the bridge interview?
I have a copy of it.
Have you seen? So they bridge interviewed 2 of the children, right?
Yes.
And how do you feel about their bridge interviews?
They tried to attack me first. In the video, Ashley Martin decides to ask my daughter if I am molesting her. And my eldest daughter quickly shot that down. She went, no, my mom is not like that. You're out of your mind, kind of thing. So then she shifted it. And she shifted the questions towards my daughter's, our daughter, her daddy. And I was watching this interview progress. And it's interesting that you say there's not a lot of psychologists who can handle children victims kind of thing. And I have had the pleasure of finding the top child psychologist in the United States, and he is phenomenal. And I've decided to follow his path. I want to get my PhD in psychology and follow his path.
Oh, good for you.
That's what I'm going to do. I have a master's degree in human services. The best way to eliminate your enemies is to learn them.
I totally agree. I
And
totally
that is
agree.
what I have done. I can
Yeah.
tell you the reason they shift questions so quickly to change the child's mindset is because their child is not following their guidance path. And so they'll take the child off the complete path and then start over.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this done to me when I was 8 years old. And I'll quickly tell you, when I was 8 weeks old was my first encounter with CPS. I was stolen by CPS in Washington State because they got the wrong family. They took me at 8 weeks and took my older sister at 2 years of age. Now, we were returned. Then, when I was 8 years old, I encountered CPS in Washington State again. And this time, I sat with this social worker, and she would ask me what my babysitter did to me, and I'd tell her. Then she said, "Well, did your daddy ever try that? Did your daddy ever play those kind of games? Did your daddy ask you to do that?" And she would do this clockwork questionnaire and turn it towards my father, who was completely innocent. He had nothing to do with it. It was my babysitter.
Mm.
And
Can I interrupt you, Audrey? Sorry. When I was 18, I had actually become a firefighter. Did all the training and everything. I was sexually harassed by a superior. And when I had to go for depositions, the attorneys did the exact same thing. I had proof and everything. The stuff had been recorded on cameras, and but then they had to throw in, well, did this type of sexual harassment start as a child with your father? Did your father ever touch you inappropriately? And my dad had never done anything. But do you know, I couldn't even look at my dad for a while. And it was super painful, only because they had put these thoughts in my head. They get
and
so
that's the plan.
detailed.
That's
Yes.
the plan.
And it makes
Think
you
about what they
literally
did to my
question.
eldest daughter. Having
Right.
my eldest daughter for such a long time and telling her, your dad's a monster. Your dad's a molester. Your dad did this to you. Your dad did that to you. And
You start questioning.
finally did what we call a false memory syndrome cause. And I could go on for hours on my research and everything that I have discovered what CPS does to children. But the fact of the matter is, this is my family. This is what happened to my daughters. And they had to rule out my 3 youngest daughters on sexual abuse because, number one, my 2 youngest didn't show any signs. And number 2, my 3rd daughter called them stupid and never changed her mind. My eldest daughter, they really ripped into. They tortured her. They threw her in jail. They lied to her. They did all of these horrible things. And she finally just said, I give. I don't blame her.
Why did they throw her in jail?
They accused her of the same crime.
Of being a perpetrator?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Against who?
My daughters.
Oh my gosh.
Do you see how evil? And I'll tell you, my sister Nicole calls me and she goes, I can't believe you'd throw her dirty laundry out there like that for everyone to see. And I was like, you're the idiot that caused the dirty laundry. How now, brown cow?
Well, and not only that, it's like it's the truth, right? It's like we have a
If the truth
question.
hurts, suck it up.
Well, but we have a question about this whole thing, the way it played out. And, it's unfortunate, but, we can't move anywhere in society if we don't see the problems, right? I mean, we have to, and that's why, when I talk about these courts and these judges and what they're doing and the denying due process and, how they ignore things. And then they come after me for, talking bad for, you can't impugn the judiciary, or, you're interfering with the administration of justice, Connie, because you are causing, scorn on the judiciary. I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe they need to clean up their act.
Good
Right.
girl.
Maybe
I
they,
did it. I did
yeah.
it just a few weeks ago. I was sitting in court and this judge was about to throw me in prison. And I told him, I said, it doesn't surprise me. You guys are corrupt. There's nothing righteous about your decisions.
Well, and it, and it's just like, with me and my fake felony, and they kept me even in the fake felony. There was a whole question in that case, the underlying case, where as an attorney with, 28 years of experience at that point, somebody who's written over 40 appellate briefs and, studies the law all the time, there was always a question about the validity of the order, because CPS snuck off to another county and got a secret court order.
Yes.
And if you read the law says that's not a valid order. Well, they hijacked that ruling and got another judge to say it was valid, and then retroactively applied it. And so in my criminal case, I wasn't even able to educate the jury on, the fact that this was not a valid order. Here's another thing. I wasn't able to educate the jury, which I asked for a very special jury instruction on ex post facto judicial determination. I wanted the judge to tell the jury that, oh, by the way, we changed the law on Miss Regularly after the fact. So just take that in mind as to the mens rea, or the knowing element. They refused that. They refused to instruct the jury on legal representation when you're charging somebody with accessory of a crime.
And
of course,
they tried to use res judicata on me when I took them back to court. And I'm like, how can you use res judicata? You're the party that brought me in here. I'm bringing you in here. This is a totally different beast.
Yeah.
And the judge agreed with me.
Oh, well, that's good. I mean, it depends on what that legal issue is. But I mean, it's so true that these court systems, I was speaking to somebody earlier today and they're like, oh, Connie, I can't wait till you get back. And I'm like, golly, the courts are so bad, and there's justice is an illusion, and that it's like, I just don't know how to make my way back into that and feel like I can even be honest with somebody. I mean, I was already at the place where I told somebody, look, it's going to cost $50,000 to get your child away from the state's grip, if we can even do it with that amount of money. So I'm like, we can't do it that way. I mean, I have attorneys calling me now all the time, basically saying, Connie, this is horrible. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do?
We're going to change the system.
Well, but we have to change it by educating people so that people understand exactly what's going on. And I talk a whole lot about the money, and, show them the money, where the money is. And they don't, because some people's like, no, that can't be true. And I'm like, yeah, it's true. So
cash for kids.
So we need to educate them. And this whole issue with what you're talking about is people need to know that really happens, that they would really rush into your home.
I invite people to read my case. It's public knowledge anyway. I invite them to read what I went through as a pro se. I fought the state pro se and was supposed to have an advisor, and he sat back there and looked like a plant on the ceiling. I mean, he did me one favor. I will say this. The judge did not allow me, that was Dambold. Judge Dambold did not allow me to cross-examine myself. I was questioned by the state, and then he tried to skip right over me. And the attorney that I had as an advisor stood up to him and said, you are violating her constitutional rights. You are giving her a reason to have an appeal. And this is not ethical for a judge to do. And Judge Dambold looked at him and said, my courtroom, my rules. Since when does a judge have godlike rights in a courtroom?
No.
They are there to interpret the law, and they are there to enforce the law.
Well, they're there to hear the facts and to reasonably apply the facts to the law.
Yes.
I mean, that's what they're supposed to do.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, they're totally, I mean, and the fact that they can just
We
change
didn't
the
even
law and make,
touch the hearings that I had.
oh yeah. Well, we've still got a little bit more time. So give us a little bit more information. This is crazy.
So after my daughter was tortured, I started doing my own research, and the allegations were 2 counts. So I was not experienced. I thought communicating with the DA would squash this. So I went to the DA and told them I have proof, physical proof, that story of my husband molesting my daughter in her bedroom, in her bed, was inaccurate. It was impossible. And they said, why? And I showed them the receipt because my husband and I had returned the bedroom set before April 8th. Their claimant was that after April 8th, she was being molested in her bed. So I shot that right out of the water.
What was she sleeping in, or what was different about the situation?
She was sleeping on the couch. I can now say that without blowing them away in court because I've already testified to it. You see, Sarah Lynn Jennings, the LPC, said that, oh, well, no, it wasn't on the bed. It was on the floor. She was in a room. No, dumbass. She wasn't. She wasn't in her room. And then the second charge was on the 25th of March. Well, the 25th of March is impossible because there were 4 other kids upstairs in Katie's room. And so I gave all of that information to the DA thinking that would squash everything. And it didn't. Then they took away my visitation. I last saw my eldest I last saw on April 21st, 2017. My last visit with my other 3 daughters was May 16th, 2017. And it was 2 days before my second daughter's birthday. I was told that my rights to visitation were terminated for no reason. And I sat down and filed 25 complaints on Cheryl Timms, the first social worker involved in our case. And she conveniently was fired. End of the case. Okay, great. They have to start all over. Nope. They transferred the case over to the supervisor, Molly Wells, and put in a new social worker by the name of Deanna Coey. Now, Deanna Coey did me a couple of favors, actually, but she did try to get me back on my visitation, but for some reason they weren't budging. So in one of the hearings, I had Deanna Coey admit that the department had violated medical information and that they were neglecting my daughter's medical needs. She got fired. So now I was dealing with Molly Wells, Tiffany Hill, who was her supervisor, and Eckerd. So I went after Eckerd and got her fired. So then I had to deal with Tiffany Hill and Molly Wells. In the trial, they testified on Cheryl Timms' behalf because Cheryl Timms was nowhere to be found. And Deanna Coey conveniently wasn't available for subpoena either. So they're testifying on their behalf. And I told the judge, this is all hearsay. I want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. The Judge Dambold told me, because I was not a social worker, I had no degree in social work whatsoever. I couldn't make that call.
Oh. Did you appeal this decision?
I did. And you want to know what the Court of Appeals, the Seventh Court of Appeals, with Brian Quinn as their head judge in the 7th District, which is located in Amarillo, Texas, said? Well, we understand that there's a need for a retrial, but none of the 4 attorneys representing me and my husband, this was attorney Jeffrey Hill, Cody Pirtle, and then the appellate attorneys, oh crumb, I can't remember her name. Erin Mullinex was mine, and my husband had another one. I can't remember his name. None of those 4 attorneys asked for a retrial. So the 7th Court of Appeals couldn't possibly give us a retrial because no one had asked for it.
Oh my
So
God.
I shot it up to the Supreme Court of Texas asking for a retrial. But because Mullinex would not support me on it, I had to go pro se, and the Supreme Court stuck their nose up at it.
This just, yeah.
Rabe was his name. So,
when did that happen? When did you get that opinion?
26th of November, 2018.
18. Yeah.
So then I took CPS back to court, and I will toot my own horn on this. I was successful in opening the case again in 2020. And that's when CPS, Michelle Surratt, played the res judicata. And I'm going, are you nuts? But Judge Anderson decided to tuck tail and agree with me, but he wouldn't reverse the decision. So my daughters stay in captivity.
Wow. Unbelievable.
That's pretty much a nutshell.
That is unbelievable. Your poor babies. I mean, they truly, I tell people all the time is, children are taken prisoner in this system.
Yes, they are. And my daughters provide $2,000 a month to my brother and his wife. And his wife drinks and drives with my daughters in the car. She bruises my daughters. She allows my daughters to go with complete strangers. She takes my daughters over to drug dealers' houses and makes my daughters clean those drug dealer houses while she's in the back doing drugs and God knows what else.
Oh my gosh.
And this is okay because CPS placed them there.
So you said this was Randall County, Texas?
Randall County, Texas.
And where is Randall County? What is that?
Amarillo, Texas, Canyon, Texas area.
Amarillo. And you're in Wyoming now. How did you get there?
After 4 attempts of kidnapping my son by CPS in 2019, 2020, no, it was 2019 and 2020 because 2021 I moved up to Wyoming. My husband decided that Texas was not safe for AJ. And so he told me to go to his home state where he insisted that veterans are supported and that I would be safe and nothing would happen to me.
So, and is he incarcerated in Texas?
Yes, he's in Abilene.
Okay. So you have some people working with him now?
Yes.
And when was his conviction?
2019.
And has he already been through the appeal?
Yes.
So are they doing a post-conviction?
Oh, you'll love this. I got to tell you about this. 7th Court of Appeals, same Court of Appeals that did our CPS case. Same judges that made the opinion on our CPS case, made the opinion on his criminal case. Conflict of interest, I believe, but could be wrong. They said, and I quote, "We failed to see why the jury had to see the bridge interview to make a fair and impartial decision on whether or not my husband was guilty." But this is what happened. Those 2 charges I blew out of the water that the DA dropped, they came back with 12 other counts, including rape.
Hmm.
And I'm going, how do you figure? Oh, well, because the LPC got my eldest daughter to say a year later that there were other events taking place.
So, so on your, so this, their comment about the bridge interview, is it not, was that not exculpatory? You don't think? You
No.
couldn't show it was exculpatory. So,
It was not exculpatory. They the DA used it as the evidence to convict my husband, but did not allow the jury to view the video because there was nothing in the video that pertained to how did they put it? To the events. Does that make sense to you? In other words, none of the video had anything to do with my daughter's outcry of sexual abuse.
right.
But they used it as evidence.
Wow.
And it's true. In the bridge interview, she never outcried about being sexually abused. Quite the opposite. And she told them, I want my daddy.
And they didn't get to see that.
No, the jury did not get to see that. Those 12 counts went up against my husband. One was dropped for whatever reason. They said my daughter testified against it. Then the jury goes back, litigates, and all their fun jazz. And I swear, I accuse them of flipping a coin because they did guilty, not guilty, guilty, not guilty, guilty, not guilty, guilty, not guilty, all the way down. So my husband was acquitted on 5 counts, and 6 he was convicted. And Judge L. Board was so mad that he made the sentencing consecutive instead of stacked.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Audrey, I'm and you started this by, talking about working with some other people now, and I sure hope you are. But we're over an hour now, and we're going to wind up.
I know.
And God bless you, and I'm glad
And
you
you as
moved.
well.
And I'm glad you moved.
I'm not.
Well,
I'm telling my husband right now. I'm sure. Wyoming, really?
yeah.
Because
because she has other CPS issues now.
Yeah, Wyoming is a corporal punishment state, and I'm going to sue them for false advertisement because they prosecute parents who use corporal punishment.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Oh, wow.
So now Wyoming has jumped on the bandwagon. No problem.
Wow. Well, stay strong and keep fighting. And yeah. And we can talk again about this issue with fighting this allegation against him. I could tell you a story about a mom who got convicted on some statements, and then they're in the process of overturning it now. But I mean, it's been an incredible battle. So
yes.
All right. Well, let's thank you, Audrey and Cynthia. I think we are ready to wrap it up for today, and we will talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
Okay. All right. Well, you ladies have a good one.
You too. Bye, Connie. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Bye.